Agatha Raisin and the Mystery of Lilac Lane. In a village where every smile hides a secret, tonight's mystery begins with a whisper no one was meant to hear. Settle in, because what unfolds next will make you question every friendly face on Lilac Lane. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Spring crept into Castley that year with a kind of smug gentleness, the sort that promised renewal while secretly plotting mud. The verges along Lilac Lane were flecked with daffodils and discarded coffee cups, and the sky had the pale sincerity of a new paint job that wouldn't last the week. Agatha Raisin, standing at her cottage window with a mug of over-strong coffee, felt a twitch of irritation that she could not quite name. Perhaps it was the sight of the moving van opposite, disgorging tasteful furniture, and a woman in cream trousers who looked as though she'd never met a grass stain in her life. Typical, Agatha muttered, another blasted goddess of domestic serenity. She had spent the winter in a fog of ennui, binge-watching crime documentaries and berating herself for every biscuit consumed. Now the village was stirring again, and this new arrival, Fiona Lacey according to gossip, had the nerve to look elegant before 10 a.m. Fiona directed the men with a calm efficiency that suggested either vast experience or innate superiority. Agatha disliked her on sight. By mid-morning, she had contrived an errand to the village shop. Mrs. Bloxby might have called it nosiness. Agatha preferred to think of it as reconnaissance. The bell over the door jangled like a tattletale as she entered. Doris Simpson, behind the counter, was decanting sultanas with the solemnity of a priestess. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin. You heard about the new one on Lilac Lane?" "Hard to miss," said Agatha, selecting a tin of sardines she didn't want. "Who is she when she's at home?" "Name's Lacey. Pretty as a picture, isn't she? They say she's some sort of designer. Gardens, maybe. Rich clients up London way." Doris lowered her voice. "Course, that's one story. According to Mavis from the post office, she's divorced from a property developer. Came here for peace and quiet." Agatha sniffed. People always say that when they've made a mess of something. "Peace and quiet," said a familiar baritone behind her. "That's a phrase that withers on the vine where you're concerned, Aggie." Charles Fraith, immaculate in tweed that had never met a hedge, smiled his lazy smile. He took a packet of mints and added, "Perhaps you're afraid she'll outshine you as Castley's most talked-about woman." "Don't be absurd," Agatha snapped, flustered enough to pay for her sardines twice. Outside, the morning had grown brighter, or perhaps merely showier. Agatha marched down the lane, heels clicking defiance at every cobble. She slowed as she neared number 7, pretending to admire the cherry blossom while inspecting the new neighbour's domain. Fiona Lacey's garden already looked annoyingly organised. Raised beds, neat gravel, the faint promise of tasteful herbs. The woman herself appeared at the gate, hair caught in a silk scarf, smile faintly apologetic. "You must be Mrs. Raisin," she said. Her voice was low and unhurried. "Everyone's been so kind. I'm still finding my feet." Agatha was disarmed by the politeness. "Yes, well, we're a friendly village. I run a detective agency, you know." "How fascinating," said Fiona, as if complimenting a Labrador for balancing a biscuit on its nose. Agatha left feeling she had lost a contest she hadn't known was happening. That afternoon she sought sympathy at the vicarage. Mrs. Bloxby poured tea that smelt faintly of bergamot and calm acceptance. "I suppose you've met our new resident," said Agatha, trying for indifference. "I have," Mrs. Bloxby said, smiling. "She seems pleasant, though sometimes new roots can disturb old soil." Agatha frowned. "Meaning what?" "Only that change, however well meant, can unsettle a village." Mrs. Bloxby stirred her tea with meditative grace. "People take time to adjust." Agatha preferred motives she could cross-examine. "Well, I'll adjust faster once I know exactly what she's hiding." "Perhaps she hides nothing," said Mrs. Bloxby mildly. "Don't be ridiculous. Everyone hides something." As she left the vicarage, drizzle began its gentle campaign. Agatha pulled her Mac tighter and felt a small thrill of purpose return. Investigation was always preferable to introspection. The next day, Bill Wong turned up, ostensibly to check on his mother's plumbing, but really to have lunch. Agatha seized him for company. Over shepherd's pie at the Red Lion, she recounted every scrap of hearsay, embellishing where necessary. "You think she's a criminal mastermind because she arranges her flower pots too neatly?" Bill asked, dabbing gravy from his tie. "Neatness is suspicious in the countryside," said Agatha. "It suggests either mania or something to hide." "Or just a woman with better taste in trousers," Bill murmured. Agatha ignored him. "Anyway, there was a van yesterday with a crest on the side. Lacey and Company Garden design. That can't be coincidence." "You'd prefer it stood for larceny and conspiracy," said Bill. "Don't mock, darling. I've an instinct for these things." Bill smiled. "Your instincts usually end in someone being mildly inconvenienced." "And justice served," Agatha said firmly. By the weekend, Fiona Lacey had become the prime topic in every shop, church pew, and queue for the chemist. Some swore she was writing a book, others whispered she had retired from television. One rumour claimed she was allergic to sunlight. Agatha, meanwhile, found herself thinking about Fiona more than she cared to admit. There was something about that poised calm which made her own restlessness feel glaring. Even her cat, Hodge, seemed to prefer watching Number 7 from the windowsill. Late Sunday afternoon, Agatha decided on Reconnaissance by baked goods. She produced a batch of scones that might have doubled as paving stones and marched across the lane. But Fiona was out. Through the gate, Agatha glimpsed a pair of gardening gloves discarded on the path, damp earth clinging to the fingertips. Nearby, a single lilac shrub, too early to bloom, had one flower half open, pale against the grey. "Show off," Agatha muttered to both plant and owner, leaving the plate on the doorstep. That evening, the village settled into its customary hush, televisions murmuring, dogs sighing, drizzle ticking on windows. Agatha settled with a detective novel she intended to improve upon mentally, yet her gaze drifted repeatedly to the window opposite. Around 10 o'clock, lights flickered in Fiona's house, on, off, on again, as though someone moved from room to room. Agatha felt the old itch of curiosity sharpen into unease. Then everything went dark. She told herself not to be dramatic. People turned lights off every night without dying. Still, she stayed at the window until the clock chimed 11. When she finally went out to bring in the milk, something pale caught her eye at her own doorstep. A single lilac blossom, fresh and damp, lying where no lilac grew nearby. She stared at it, half annoyed, half unnerved. "If that's a neighbourly gesture," she said aloud, "it's a creepy one." Hodge mewed from behind the door, unimpressed. Agatha placed the blossom in a jam jar and regarded it thoughtfully. Somewhere in the quiet lane, a car door clicked shut. She could not tell from which direction. The sound left behind the faint scent of lilac or imagination. She turned off the porch light, muttering, "New roots disturbing old soil, eh? We'll see about that." And as she climbed the stairs, the blossom gleamed faintly in the dark kitchen below, proof, perhaps, that spring in Carsley never arrived without mischief. The following Saturday arrived with improbable sunshine, the sort that made the Cotswolds look smug. Carsley basked in it like an aging beauty under flattering light, and Agatha Raisin, standing before her mirror, was engaged in combat with a turquoise scarf that refused to drape as she intended. "It's only a garden party," she muttered, though her reflection showed a woman dressed for conquest. She had selected a linen dress, a shade too bold for local taste, and sprayed enough perfume to stun bees at 10 paces. Roy Silver, down from London for the weekend, lounged in her kitchen sipping a cappuccino and watching with open amusement. "Darling, this Fiona creature won't know what's hit her. You'll be the social event, not the garden." "Don't be ridiculous," said Agatha, though she didn't object to the idea. "We're simply going to be neighbourly." "Neighbourly with lipstick and heels," said Roy. "My favourite kind of charity work." When they arrived at number 7 Lilac Lane, the party was already humming. Fiona Lacey's garden was infuriatingly perfect. Borders precise as pastry edges, lawns cropped to billiard smoothness, and flower beds that looked like they'd been designed by angels with rulers. A faint fragrance of lilac drifted in the air, the real expensive kind, not the air freshener imitation. Guests circulated with glasses of chilled rosé, all talking at once about compost ratios, mulch, and the importance of bees. Agatha decided it was the most self-satisfied congregation since the parish council's award ceremony. "Ah, Mrs. Raisin," Fiona approached with that serene smile that made Agatha's teeth itch. "How wonderful you could come, and this must be your friend." "Roy Silver," said Roy, shaking her hand with theatrical warmth. "Public relations, darling. If ever your roses need a press agent, I'm your man." A few guests laughed politely, others looked alarmed. Fiona's smile stayed fixed, though Agatha noticed a flicker of tension when a tall woman in a flamboyant hat, later introduced as Belinda Dare, a rival garden designer, drifted past with a glass of wine and a look of mild disdain. Charles Frayth arrived late, immaculate as ever, bearing a bottle of vintage champagne. He kissed Agatha's cheek. "You look radiant, Aggie, practically photosynthesizing." "Flatterer," said Agatha, hiding her delight behind a scowl. "Jealous already," murmured Roy. The afternoon shimmered along with the sound of small egos rustling like leaves. Conversation meandered through topics from slug deterrents to the relative virtues of Tuscan stone. Agatha endured a lecture from Councillor Greavves on sustainable irrigation until even Roy wandered off to flirt with a man who claimed to own a vineyard. Agatha was refilling her glass when she heard the sharp, panicked shriek. Every head turned. Fiona Lacey was swaying near the rose arch, her hand pressed to her neck. She dropped her wineglass, it shattered like punctuation in the stunned silence. "A wasp!" someone cried. Guests surged forward with the efficiency of people unused to emergencies but eager to be involved. Fiona gasped, face pale, eyes wide, but what caught Agatha's attention was not pain, but terror, real, unguarded fear. "She's allergic!" cried Belinda Dare, dramatically clutching her pearls. "Nonsense," said Fiona hoarsely. "I'm fine, just startled." Charles, bending gallantly, retrieved her fallen glass. "You need to sit down." "No, really," Fiona insisted, though she allowed him to lead her to a garden chair. Agatha hovered, eyeing the untouched jug of rosé and the bees nowhere in sight. Mrs. Blocksby appeared at Agatha's elbow, quiet as a vicar's thought. "Poor woman," she murmured, "but she does seem quite frightened." "You noticed that too," said Agatha. "Doesn't look like a wasp sting to me. More like she's seen a ghost." Mrs. Blocksby gave her that mild, unreadable smile. "Let's hope not." After a few reassuring murmurs and a dab of cream, Fiona insisted on resuming hostess duties. The mood recovered slowly, lubricated by alcohol and denial. Roy reappeared, flushed with gossip. Apparently Belinda and our hostess had a row over a Chelsea contract. One accused the other of stealing a client's garden design. Scandalous, darling. Said Agatha. "People will poison each other's reputations long before they poison anything else." Yet when she sipped her fresh glass of wine, she paused. The taste was off, bitter, metallic. She set it down discreetly, scanning the table. 2 bottles stood open, identical labels, yet one's cork was stained darker than the other. She looked up in time to see Belinda Dare watching her, expression oddly amused. "You're frowning, Mrs. Raisin," said Belinda, stepping closer. "Too much sun?" "Just thinking," said Agatha lightly. "Lovely party. Shame about the wasp." Belinda's smile did not reach her eyes. Was it a wasp? Before Agatha could respond, Charles joined them, his charm diffusing the tension. "Aggie, you must come admire the pond. Fiona's pride and joy. Apparently the koi have better pedigrees than most of us." "Charmed, I'm sure," said Agatha, but followed. The pond was indeed lovely. Smooth water reflecting the late sunlight, lilies in bloom. Nearby, a spray of lilac blossoms perfumed the air. Fiona was leaning over the water, speaking quietly with Councillor Greavves. Their voices carried just enough for Agatha to catch fragments. "Told you to wait," Fiona's tone sharp, controlled. "You've no leverage," Greavves hissed. "Don't start something you can't finish." They turned abruptly as Agatha and Charles approached. Fiona's smile snapped back into place. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" "Deceptively so," said Agatha. By twilight the party wound down. Roy was dancing badly with a woman from the parish council, Charles was chatting to Fiona about roses, and Agatha was pretending to admire a hedge while eavesdropping. That was when she overheard it. 2 women near the trestle table, voices low and intent. "She deserved it," one whispered. "Shh, someone will hear." Agatha's head snapped round, but they moved away into the dusk before she could see who spoke. Moments later, Fiona approached her with polite weariness. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Raisin. You've quite the knack for livening an occasion." Agatha blinked. "I didn't do anything." "Exactly," said Fiona, with a ghost of a smile. Then, lowering her voice, "You might be right about ghosts after all." Before Agatha could ask what she meant, Fiona turned away, saying her goodnights. Charles drove Agatha and Roy home. Roy was voluble, Charles reflective, and Agatha unusually silent. She kept replaying the scene, Fiona's fear, the bitter taste of wine, the overheard whisper. It was all vague, unsatisfying, yet something prickled at her instincts. "You're quiet," Charles remarked as they turned onto the lane. "Just wondering," she said, "how many people bring poison to a garden party?" "Depends on the company," said Charles lightly. Roy yawned. "Darling, it's the Cotswolds. They bring it in Tupperware." Agatha almost smiled. The car stopped outside her cottage, the night air fragrant with lilac and damp earth. Across the lane, Fiona's house stood serene under moonlight, windows dark. "See," said Charles, "all peaceful. No murders tonight." "Don't tempt fate," said Agatha. The next morning dawned overcast, the sunshine having exhausted itself with yesterday's pretense. Agatha was halfway through her first coffee when the siren's wail fractured the calm. She hurried outside, just as Bill Wong's police car slid to a stop by Lilac Lane. A small crowd had already gathered, drawn by the irresistible scent of calamity. Mrs. Bloxby stood among them, hands clasped, face pale. Agatha crossed the lane, heart thudding. "What is it?" she demanded. Bill's expression was grim. "Fiona Lacey's dead. Found her by the pond." "The pond?" Agatha repeated. "Looks like she fell, but we're treating it as suspicious." Agatha's gaze drifted past him to the garden she had envied only yesterday. Uniformed officers moved carefully among the blossoms. On the still surface of the ornamental pond floated a single lilac flower, pale and perfect, its reflection trembling in the breeze. She felt an unexpected chill. The flower was identical to the one left on her doorstep nights ago. Carsley's morning peace had shattered, and Agatha Raisin, though she would never admit it aloud, felt the first stirrings of dread and excitement. Later that morning, Carsley wore the brazen cheerfulness only the English countryside can manage after tragedy. The sun glittered on wet lawns, birds chirped with infuriating optimism, and Lilac Lane was cordoned off by a ribbon of police tape that flapped gently in the breeze, like bunting for the world's worst fate. Agatha Raisin stood outside her gate, clutching a mug of coffee she no longer wanted. Her hair was untidy, her temper worse. Uniformed officers moved about Fiona Lacey's immaculate garden, their boots leaving satisfying prints in the perfection. Agatha, despite herself, felt a pang of triumph. The woman had been too flawless by half, and now death had scuffed her edges. Bill Wong emerged from the garden, clipboard in hand. His calm expression suggested he'd been born wearing police tape. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin." "Don't Mrs. Raisin me, Bill Wong. What happened?" "Officially, we're not sure yet. She was found by the pond early this morning. No sign of forced entry, no note, and the neighbours heard nothing." "And unofficially?" "Unofficially, it's suspicious," he admitted. "Toxicology will tell us more." "Suspicious?" Agatha's eyes gleamed. "Then it's murder." "Or accident," Bill countered. "She might have slipped. The ground's uneven near the water." "Nonsense. That woman didn't even let her garden shed get untidy, let alone herself." "Please," said Bill mildly, "don't interfere." Agatha raised an eyebrow. "Interfere? I merely live opposite a corpse." Bill sighed, aware the battle was lost. By mid-morning, Carsley had transformed into its natural state, a hive of speculative industry. At the village shop, theories multiplied faster than yeast. Doris Simpson was selling newspapers and conspiracies in equal measure. "Heard they found a note," she whispered to Mrs. Boggle from the post office. "Blackmail, apparently." "Utter rubbish," said Agatha, who had entered just in time to hear it. "If there'd been a note, Bill would have told me." "Oh, he would he?" said Doris. "And what makes you so special, then?" "Experience," said Agatha crisply. "I've solved more murders than you've baked fruitcakes." "And that's saying something," murmured Charles Fraith behind her, reaching for a packet of mints. "You," said Agatha, glaring, "should be helping, not smirking." "Helping how?" he asked. "Charming confessions out of gardeners?" "If necessary." Mrs. Boggle leaned in. "They say her assistant's taking it hard." "Mark Hensley?" Agatha asked. "The weepy young man at the party." "That's him. Screaming and crying, apparently, when they told him. Poor thing." "Poor thing, my foot," said Agatha. "Real grief doesn't leave time for theatrics." Charles grinned. "You're compassion incarnate." "Oh, shut up," she snapped and left. Outside Fiona's house, the press had arrived, drawn by the words Cotswold Death Mystery, like bees to jam. Cameras clicked as if grief were photogenic. Agatha pushed through, chin high, ignoring their questions. She found Mark Hensley near the gate, blotchy-faced and holding a handkerchief with the devotion of a relic. "Terrible, terrible," he kept repeating. "She was so kind to me, like a mother." "Really?" said Agatha. "I had her down as more of a monarch." "You didn't know her," he said hotly. "Fiona was misunderstood. People envied her success." "Such as?" He blinked. "You mean Belinda? Everyone knows about their feud, but Fiona wasn't cruel. She expected high standards." Agatha's curiosity pricked. "Standards like burying your boss's secrets under mulch?" He sniffed dramatically. "I won't listen to gossip." "Then you'd best stay indoors," she said. As she turned to leave, an officer lifted a small evidence bag containing a folded letter, edges damp and stained. The label read, "Found in glove box of deceased's car." Agatha pretended not to notice, and noticed everything. That afternoon, the vicarage became a sanctuary of controlled curiosity. Mrs. Bloxby, pouring tea with serene precision, had already heard 10 versions of events. "It's tragic," she said softly, "and it will bring out the worst in everyone." "It already has," said Agatha. "Half the village is practically auditioning for Midsummer Murders." Mrs. Bloxby smiled faintly. "And what part will you play?" "The competent lead," Agatha said. "Bill's treating me like an amateur, but I know there's more to this. She was frightened at that party. I saw it." "Sometimes fear has nothing to do with crime," said Mrs. Bloxby. "It can be personal. So can murder." "Agatha, do be careful." "I'm always careful." Mrs. Bloxby gave her a look of maternal disbelief. Later, in the Red Lion, Agatha found Charles and Roy installed by the window, nursing pints and moral superiority. "Ah, the sleuth returns," said Charles. "Any progress?" "Only that the whole village is lying," said Agatha, sitting down. "About what?" "About everything." Roy leaned in. "I've got a London contact in PR who says Fiona once worked for a celebrity couple. Apparently she left after a misunderstanding involving a credit card and several £1,000s. "So, thief or blackmailer?" asked Charles. "Possibly both," said Agatha. "Bill found a letter. I'd bet my manicure it's about money." "You're impossible," said Charles affectionately. "You haven't even seen it." "No, but I will." "Aggie," Roy said, lowering his voice, "I overheard one of the officers say there was a flower in her hand. Lilac, apparently. Isn't that poetic? Like nature's calling card." Agatha frowned. "Lilac? In her hand?" "Yes. Lovely touch, really." "Lovely?" She turned the thought over. A lilac blossom. Again. But Fiona's lilac bush had barely budded. "Roy," she said, "I don't suppose you remember seeing any blooming lilacs in her garden." "Of course not. I was busy trying not to get stung by the wasp of social hierarchy." "Exactly," Agatha murmured. Charles arched an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "Meaning," said Agatha, "that someone brought those lilacs from somewhere else." As evening drew in, Agatha returned home, the lane quieter now but for the hum of conversation through half-shut windows. She paused by her own hedge, staring at the dark shape of Fiona's house. It looked smaller somehow, humbled by its own tragedy. She stooped to pluck a petal from her sleeve, pale lilac, faintly scented, carried by the breeze perhaps, or something more deliberate. She turned it between her fingers, thoughtful. "Symbol or signature?" she murmured. Inside, Hodge greeted her with the imperious yowl of one unimpressed by murder. She fed him, poured herself a small whiskey, and sat by the window, watching the blue lights fade. A faint guilt stirred beneath her excitement. Fiona Lacey was dead, and Agatha was already thinking in motives and clues. But what else could she do? Solving mysteries was the only time she felt entirely herself, bold, certain, alive. Still, she thought, swirling her drink, the sight of that flower had left a chill. There were no blooming lilacs on Lilac Lane, only the humankind, showy, fragile, and full of secrets. Rain had returned to Castley as if to wash away the scandal, though Agatha Raisin knew better. The Cotswold drizzle might soften lawns, but it never dampened gossip. By the time she'd finished her morning coffee, Fiona Lacey's death had already sprouted rumours like weeds, poisonous ones if handled correctly. Agatha buttoned her trench coat, grabbed her umbrella, and set out with purpose disguised as shopping. Her stated goal was a bag of fertilizer from the garden centre. Her actual one was intelligence gathering. The centre, a cheerfully overpriced emporium of begonias and bad advice, was buzzing. Behind the till stood Mrs. Dutton, a woman whose tongue was as sharp as her pruning shears. "Terrible business, that poor Fiona," Mrs. Dutton began before Agatha could even feign disinterest. "Such a lovely garden, too. You wouldn't think death could thrive among petunias." "Death thrives anywhere," said Agatha dryly, "especially when overwatered." Mrs. Dutton leaned forward. "You knew her, didn't you? They say she had midnight visitors. Some man, tall, wore a cap." "Who's they?" "Oh, people talk. Her neighbour, Mrs. Elms, heard a car at odd hours more than once. Headlights sweeping across her curtains. Terrifying." "Perhaps she was having an affair," Agatha said briskly, hoping to sound worldly rather than nosy. Mrs. Dutton smirked. "Or perhaps she was being blackmailed." Agatha raised an eyebrow. "You've been reading too many crime novels." "Takes one to know one," Mrs. Dutton replied. "You're the detective, aren't you?" Agatha bought the fertilizer out of sheer embarrassment. She disliked being predictable. Outside, the rain had mellowed into drizzle, persistent, prying, like Castley itself. She paused at the notice board outside the church, scanning the smudged posters for something incriminating. Instead, she found a flyer for the parish fair and a note in Mrs. Bloxby's tidy handwriting. Volunteers still needed for the cake stall. The vicar emerged from the porch, startled to find Agatha lurking. "Ah, Mrs. Raisin. Terrible weather." "It's England," she said. "Weather's our only reliable institution." He smiled uneasily. "You're investigating Fiona Lacey's death, I gather." "Not investigating, merely interested," she said. "Though I hear she had a disagreement with you." He flushed. "A minor matter. She wanted to extend her garden fence onto a strip of parish-owned land. I refused permission. It was nothing serious." "Most murders start with nothing serious," said Agatha. "Mrs. Raisin," he said in the tone reserved for sinners and journalists, "I'd appreciate it if you didn't spread gossip." "Me? Spread gossip?" Agatha looked offended. "I'm merely collecting it." She left him frowning at the rain. Next stop was the post office, where Belinda Dare stood in line wearing sunglasses despite the gloom. Her perfume arrived 5 seconds before she did. "Mrs. Raisin," she said coolly. "Still playing detective?" "Just picking up stamps," Agatha lied. "And sniffing around the dead woman's affairs, no doubt. Fiona loved to stir trouble." "So I hear," said Agatha. "Jealousy is an ugly thing, Belinda. It doesn't suit your complexion." Belinda gave a brittle laugh. "Don't flatter yourself, Agatha. I couldn't compete with her clients even if I wanted to. She stole half my business and all my ideas. Her death's the only original work she ever managed." The room went still. Agatha's eyebrows rose. "You're remarkably frank for someone under suspicion." "Suspicion?" Belinda's tone turned icy. "If you repeat that, I'll sue." "Oh, I wouldn't dream of it," said Agatha sweetly. "Though I do wonder how your boots got so muddy. Not much gardening weather lately." Belinda's nostrils flared, but she swept out with all the dignity of a queen late for her execution. Agatha paid for her stamps, then stepped outside to inspect the pavement. Her own boots were caked in mud, but at least hers came from legitimate sleuthing. Charles Frayth's silver car appeared round the corner, purring smugly. He rolled down the window. "Aggie, you look like a woman who's just interrogated half the county." "And learned nothing," she said, "except that everyone in Castley lies." "That's the charm of village life. Hop in. I'm taking you to lunch." "You're not taking me anywhere," she said, climbing in. The Swan and Trumpet was warm, fragrant with roast lamb and quiet scandal. Charles ordered wine before she could protest. "Honestly, Charles, it's barely noon." "Perfect time for civilization," he said. "You'll tell me everything while pretending not to." "There's nothing to tell," said Agatha, "except muddy footprints outside Fiona's gate. Too big for her, too small for Mark Hensley, and someone visiting at midnight." "Sounds romantic," said Charles. "Romance kills," said Agatha. "I should know," he grinned. "You just haven't met the right corpse." Agatha couldn't help laughing. "You're impossible. That's why you like me." She ignored him, stabbing at her shepherd's pie, yet she felt the warmth of his gaze linger. Beneath the teasing, Charles was always watching, amused, detached, but rarely indifferent. "Bill still keeping you in the dark?" he asked. "He tries," said Agatha, but I've my own sources and instincts." "Instincts or vanity?" "Both," she said. "They usually agree." After lunch, Agatha insisted on walking back. The rain had paused, leaving behind a faint scent of earth and something bitter. Passing Fiona's cottage, she noticed police markers by the gate and crouched to examine them. The muddy footprints were clear now, size 8, maybe 9, tread sharp, not a gardener's boots. A constable noticed her crouching. "Please step back, madam." "Detective Raisin," she said grandly, showing no badge whatsoever. "Never heard of you," said the constable. "You will," she promised, and stepped back with wounded dignity. At home, she called Bill. "Agatha," he said warily, "I'm in the middle of something." Then multitask. "You've had the lab results, haven't you?" Silence. "Bill, if you don't tell me, I'll ask the Daily Mail. They love a mystery with middle-aged glamour." He groaned. "All right. Yes, we have preliminary results. There were traces of digitalis in her bloodstream." "Foxglove poison," said Agatha, satisfaction and horror mingling. "Common, accessible, and poetic." "It doesn't prove murder," said Bill. "Digitalis can build up accidentally. Heart medication, certain teas, or wine at a garden party," she cut in. "Agatha, leave this to us." "Us? You mean the police who didn't notice the midnight visitor?" "We're aware of that rumour." "Rumour, my foot. I've got 3 independent confirmations." "From whom?" "Women who know how to observe curtains," she said tartly. "You should recruit them." "Agatha." She hung up. Evening settled overcastly with its usual deceptive calm, chimney smoke curling upward, the smell of dinners and damp wool drifting through the air. Agatha sat at her kitchen table, Hodge purring on her lap, staring at the unopened bag of fertilizer beside her. "Symbolic," she told the cat. "Everyone around here's busy covering something up." She thought of Fiona's flawless garden, perfection achieved through ruthless pruning. Perhaps that was how she lived too, cutting back anyone who threatened her design. It would certainly earn enemies. Still, Agatha felt a twinge of guilt. Death had a way of making vanity seem small. She poured herself a glass of wine, hesitated, then sniffed it suspiciously before taking a sip. The clock ticked. Rain resumed, tapping gently against the window. Somewhere outside, a car engine murmured and faded. She caught herself glancing toward Fiona's darkened house again. So, digitalis, foxglove poison, easy to find in any garden, including her own, and the lilac blossoms. She had brushed more petals from her sleeve today, faintly perfumed, not from any nearby shrub. Agatha frowned. There were no blooming lilacs in Castle yet. "Then where," she murmured, stroking Hodge's fur, "are they coming from?" The cat yawned, unimpressed. "Fine," she said. "I'll find out myself." She leaned back, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. For all her indignation and age-defying moisturizer, nothing thrilled Agatha Raisin quite like a new lead, especially one that smelled faintly of deceit and springtime. The morning of the Mercester Flower Show dawned with deceptive brightness, one of those crisp, self-satisfied Cotswold days when the sky looked freshly laundered and everyone behaved as though good weather were a personal achievement. Agatha Raisin, however, was already cross. It had started with a bad hair day and worsened when she realized Belinda Dare had entered the show with a display titled Lilac Elegance. Agatha had only joined the competition out of boredom, entering her own exhibit, Summer Serenity, mostly to irritate her rival. The name had sounded tasteful until she'd actually arranged the flowers and realized they looked more like summer's hangover. "Roy," she snapped, watching him fuss over her stand, "that ribbon needs to be higher. We're competing, not mourning." "Darling, they're flowers, not supermodels," said Roy Silver, flicking a petal into place with the air of a Broadway choreographer. "Besides, I've had a fabulous idea. We should turn this whole thing into a cause." "A cause?" "Yes. Justice for Fiona. Posters, badges, maybe a petition to demand answers. We'd look frightfully civic-minded. You could give a quote to the Mercester Gazette. Something like, 'Flowers fade, but truth endures.'" "Oh, for heaven's sake," said Agatha. "This is a flower show, not a protest march." "Publicity, my dear, publicity," Roy trilled, already rummaging in his bag for a marker pen. Before Agatha could throttle him, Charles Fraith arrived, casual as ever in chinos and charm. "Morning, Aggie. I see you've brought your usual modesty to the proceedings." "You're just jealous," she said, eyeing his boutonniere. a perfectly chosen lilac sprig. "And don't call me Aggie in public." "As you wish, Mrs. Raisin," he said with mock gravity. Bill Wong appeared next, looking weary. "Please tell me you're not involved in Roy's campaign." "He's involved in himself," said Agatha. "We're honoring Fiona's memory," Roy protested. "Awareness is key." "You'll raise awareness of how to get arrested for obstruction," said Bill. "Try not to start a riot among the begonias." "Spoil sport," muttered Roy. The flower show grounds buzzed with genteel competition. Stalls overflowed with dahlias, roses, and suspiciously perfect marrows. Elderly judges moved from display to display, clipboards at the ready. The Mercester Ladies' Guild were running the tea tent with an efficiency that would shame the army. Agatha's display stood between Belinda's immaculate lilacs and a tragic collection of wilted carnations submitted by Councillor Greavves. She caught Greavves berating a young man near the judging table, Mark Hensley, Fiona's former assistant. "You'll get that money to me this week," Greavves hissed. "I've been more than patient." "I told you I can't yet," said Mark, voice trembling. "I've no excuses. A consultancy is a consultancy. You owe me, and I don't forget debts." Agatha, pretending to adjust a vase, leaned closer. But before she could hear more, Belinda's voice sliced through the air. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin," she said sweetly, "I didn't know spite had its own colour palette." "And I didn't know envy wore perfume that could stun livestock," said Agatha. Several onlookers tittered. Belinda's smile froze. "Some of us enter for pleasure, not attention." "Then why are you wearing heels in a field?" Belinda flounced off, and Agatha felt marginally better. By midday, the judges made their rounds. Agatha's display, to her mild astonishment, had not collapsed. She stood tall, pretending she didn't care about the results. Charles sidled over, offering a paper cup of Pimm's. "It's cruel, really," he murmured. "So many fragile egos and only 3 rosettes." "Mine's not fragile," said Agatha. "It's bulletproof." "Then why are you gripping that cup like a lifeline?" "Because I can't throttle anyone in public," she said, though a smile betrayed her amusement. The judges paused at Belinda's stand, murmuring appreciatively. Agatha scowled. Belinda's lilacs were exquisite, pale mauve perfection, arranged like a hymn to smugness. Then one of the judges frowned. "What's this?" he said, touching a petal. "It's gone limp." Belinda gasped. "That's impossible. They were fine 10 minutes ago." Within moments, her entire display began to wilt dramatically, the blossoms drooping as though fainting from scandal. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Looks like someone sabotaged her entry," whispered Charles. "Serves her right," said Agatha, then immediately added, "Of course I disapprove of such behaviour." Belinda's assistant dashed up, pale with panic. "The water's cloudy, smells like salt." Bill appeared, frowning. "Salt water? That would dehydrate the stems. Who had access to the containers?" "Anyone," said Belinda, glaring at Agatha. "It's obvious who'd want to ruin me." "Don't be absurd," Agatha snapped. "If I wanted you destroyed, I'd pick something subtler." "Ladies," said Bill warningly, though his eyes held amusement. The incident threw the show into uproar. Judges conferred, officials muttered, and the tea tent ran out of scones under the strain. Agatha, meanwhile, observed Mark Hensley lurking near the refreshments table, talking nervously to Councillor Greavves again. She drifted closer. "I'm telling you, I've no money," Mark was saying. "She was supposed to pay me that consultancy fee before she—" "Before she what?" asked Agatha too loudly. They both jumped. Greavves recovered first. "Before she finished the project, of course. Good day, Mrs. Raisin." "A profitable one, I hope," she said. Mark flushed. "You've got it wrong. I just did some design work for him." "Designs that involved blackmail letters, perhaps?" "What? No, you've been listening to gossip." "That's where truth hides," said Agatha, "in gossip's skirts." He stalked off, muttering. Charles appeared behind her. "You're enjoying yourself far too much." "I'm following the scent," she said. "Lilac again?" "No, something sour. Greavves smells of guilt and Mark smells of desperation. Together they'd make quite the bouquet." The judging concluded without further incident. Agatha's display received a highly commended, which she interpreted as a conspiracy. Belinda, humiliated by her drooping lilacs, left before the prizes were even announced. Roy tried to console her on the way out, though his version of comfort involved distributing Justice for Fiona flyers to anyone who'd accept one. "You're making us look like lunatics," Agatha hissed, snatching one. It featured a dreadful photo of her from the previous year's fete beside the words, "Truth blossoms where Agatha Raisin walks." "Catchy, isn't it?" Roy beamed. "Libelous, more like," said Bill, appearing with a harassed look. "Roy, if you put one of those on a police car again, I'll arrest you for vandalism." "Public engagement, darling," Roy protested. "Even criminals need good PR." "You'd make a marvellous defence witness," said Bill dryly. Back in Carsley that evening, Agatha collapsed into her armchair with a sigh. Hodge curled at her feet, unimpressed by human vanity. She replayed the day's events, the quarrel between Greavves and Mark, Belinda's ruined display, and the faint tang of salt on the air. It all felt connected somehow, like different stems in the same poisonous bouquet. Her phone rang. It was Mrs. Bloxby. "Agatha, dear, I thought I should mention something. It may be nothing, but I saw Fiona Lacey the week before she died, arguing with an elderly man near Lilac Lane. He was wearing tweeds and looked terribly cross. I assumed it was a client dispute, but now—" "You're sure it was before she died?" "Quite sure. I remember because the church clock struck 8, and I was late for the prayer group." "Did you recognize him?" "No, though I thought he seemed oddly familiar." Agatha's mind ticked. An elderly man in tweeds. Not Mark, not Greavves. Someone else entirely. "Thank you, Mrs. Bloxby. That's very helpful." "Do be careful, Agatha," said the vicar's wife gently. "Gardens may look peaceful, but they can hide all sorts of roots beneath the surface." Agatha smiled. "And I intend to dig them up." She hung up, poured herself a generous glass of wine, and gazed out at her own flower beds, which looked distinctly unimpressed with her efforts. Somewhere in the distance thunder rumbled, the kind that never quite arrived but reminded one to keep the windows latched. She felt the faint thrill of the hunt again, mingled with melancholy. People could cultivate roses and civility all they liked, but secrets, she thought, were the real perennials of village life. "Hodge," she murmured, "I think it's time we got our hands dirty." The cat yawned. Agatha raised her glass. "To murder and marigolds," she said wryly. "Both thrive on attention." Rain had gone off sulking somewhere over the hills, leaving the Cotswolds rinsed and gleaming. The morning air smelt of wet stone, coffee, and other people's business, a combination that always sharpened Agatha Raisin's appetite for sleuthing. She had just finished breakfast when the doorbell rang. Fritz, the postman, stood there looking put upon, his Labrador panting beside him. "Sorry to bother, Mrs. Raisin," he said, "but the dogs found something odd behind that dead woman's shed." "That dead woman being Fiona Lacey," said Agatha. "And what sort of something odd?" "Envelope, buried in the compost heap. Dog sniffed it out. Thought you might want to take a look before I hand it to the police, seeing as you always do." Agatha's grin spread. "You're a treasure, Fritz, and if anyone asks, we merely happened to be passing." The garden behind number 7 Lilac Lane was still sealed off by a half-hearted police cordon. Agatha ducked under it, handbag first. Fritz looked away as though this might absolve him of complicity. The compost heap steamed gently in the weak sunlight, giving off an odour somewhere between decay and ambition. "There," said Fritz, pointing. Half buried under damp leaves lay a muddy envelope. Agatha plucked it out with a grimace, prizing it open. Inside were several crumpled receipts, purchases of Digitalis purpurea extract, Foxglove concentrate. The handwriting was Fiona's, but the buyer's name had been altered. First an F, then clumsily overwritten into a G. "Foxglove," she murmured, and Fiona's garden was immaculate. No stray weeds there, so why hide these? "Maybe she was dosing her plants," said Fritz doubtfully. "Or her husband," said Agatha. He blinked. "Didn't she not have one?" "Oh, she did. G. Lacey, missing, mysterious, or both." Fritz looked nervous. "Best not keep that too long, Mrs. Raisin. Police might think you're tampering." "Nonsense," said Agatha, tucking the envelope into her bag. "I'm rescuing evidence from incompetence." By late afternoon, she was at Charles Frayth's manor, waving the receipts like a flag. He listened with his usual air of amused detachment, lounging in a chair that probably cost more than her kitchen. "So," he said, "you're suggesting Fiona murdered herself with foxglove extract to frame her ex-husband, or he murdered her to reclaim his receipts? I'm losing the plot already." "Don't be obtuse. Someone buried this to hide the connection. I want to see what else she was hiding." You're proposing breaking into a crime scene. It's not breaking in, it's research. That's my line, said Charles. Then come along and make it true. He sighed. You do realize I had plans this evening? Yes, but none worth keeping. Night fell softly over Lilac Lane, bringing with it that particular hush that made every sound scandalous. Agatha and Charles crept along the hedge, torches in hand. Keep your light down, whispered Agatha. I can't see where I'm stepping, he whispered back. That's the idea. They reached the shed, its padlock shiny with recent use. Charles produced a small toolkit from his pocket. Honestly, she whispered, do all aristocrats carry burglary kits? Only the useful ones. He jimmied the lock open with infuriating ease. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of fertilizer and secrecy. Garden tools gleamed on hooks. On a workbench lay sketch pads spattered with soil and ink. Agatha flipped one open and froze. Each page showed elegant landscape plans, signed neatly at the bottom. G. Lacey. Her husband, she breathed. He designed these gardens. Charles peered over her shoulder. Or she used his name for prestige. These designs are good, too good for amateur vanity. She must have stolen them, said Agatha. That's why she hid the receipts. If she'd bought the Foxglove extract for her husband's designs, it would tie them together. Or she kept his name because she couldn't let go, said Charles quietly. Agatha ignored the pang that line stirred. Either way, it's our first solid lead. She turned, torch sweeping across the shed, and landed on a half-buried metal box near the compost heap. Curiosity flared. She stepped out and began digging with the toe of her shoe. Aggie, be careful. He didn't finish. With a satisfying squelch, Charles stepped directly into the compost heap. Oh, that's revolting. Agatha clapped a hand to her mouth, shaking with laughter. Research has its hazards. If you tell anyone, oh, I shall, frequently. He extracted his foot with a noise like a reluctant pudding and wiped it on the grass, muttering. You'd think compost was solid, he said. You'd think you were graceful, she countered. The moment of levity faded as she prized open the box. Inside were more sketches, a few letters, and a faded photograph. Fiona, younger, standing beside a man with kind eyes and ink-stained hands. So, that's G. Lacey, said Agatha. Hardly the type to vanish forever. Charles examined the letters. Postmarks from Spain 3 years ago. Looks like he kept in touch. She wasn't hiding from him, she was hiding with him. His identity, at least. She was still using his work. And someone found out, Agatha said softly. Perhaps the good counsellor. He seemed fond of money-making schemes. Or her assistant, Mark. He knew too much about her business. He could have used it to blackmail her. There's a cheerful thought, said Charles. We're ankle-deep in muck, literally and morally. Agatha closed the box. We'll take this back for analysis. You mean gossip over it with Bill, said Charles. Same thing. They slipped out as quietly as they'd entered, though Agatha's laughter nearly betrayed them, when Charles tripped over the gate latch and muttered language unbecoming of a gentleman. Back at her cottage, Agatha spread the contents across the table under the lamplight. The drawings glowed softly, fluid lines of gardens, ponds, and stone walls, each labelled in Fiona's handwriting. But the signatures remained the same. G. Lacey. She felt a twinge of something approaching pity. To live so perfectly, to arrange every flower and facade, yet be rooted in deception. Vanity and fear made a potent mix. Agatha understood both intimately. Charles poured them each a whiskey. You do realize, he said, that we're in possession of stolen property. So are most of my ex-husbands, said Agatha. He grinned. You're impossible. Thank you. They drank in companionable silence until he rose, brushing soil from his sleeve. Well, I'll leave you to your moral dilemmas. Try not to frame anyone before breakfast. Not without proper evidence, she said, though she felt the thrill of momentum. Morning arrived pale and breezy, the kind of day that tried to look innocent after hosting crime the night before. Agatha had just finished her second cup of coffee when Bill Wong appeared at her door, expression grim. You've been busy, he said. Always, she said. You've been snooping. Officially, we got a report of trespass on Lilac Lane. How dull of them to assume it was me, she said, because it was you. Technicality, he sighed. Well, since you've saved me the trouble of finding you, I might as well tell you. Fiona's ex-husband, Gavin Lacey, landed at Heathrow last night. Passport shows he's been in Spain for years, working as a garden consultant. He's back in England. Agatha's pulse quickened. So the ghost returns. He's already called the police, Bill added. Says he's got information about his wife's business. He's coming to see us today. And you'll let me know what he says? No, said Bill, which is precisely why you'll probably find out first. You know me too well. That's the problem, he said, heading for the door. As it closed behind him, Agatha leaned against the table, staring at the sketches. G. Lacey, Fiona's ex, her signature, her shadow. Everything about her death seemed entangled with that name, as though the murder had roots reaching years back. Outside, a robin landed on her window box, chirping cheerfully amid the damp soil. Agatha smiled despite herself. Secrets in compost, she murmured, always something waiting to grow. And somewhere out there, she thought, someone was tending the truth, or burying it deeper. Carsley had seen its share of eccentrics, but few arrivals stirred as much curiosity as the man who stepped out of the taxi that morning, tall, sun-browned, and wrapped in a linen jacket that had once been expensive. He paused before 7 Lilac Lane, gazed at the sealed gate, and sighed with the air of someone arriving not home, but at the ruins of his reputation. Agatha Raisin watched the scene from her window with the fascination of a cat eyeing a bird with a limp. Bill had called at dawn. Gavin Lacey, Fiona's estranged husband back from Spain. Cooperative, he says. Charming too. Be careful. Charming, Agatha muttered. Always the most dangerous breed. By the time she arrived at the Red Lion an hour later, the newcomer was already installed at a corner table, nursing coffee and charm in equal measure. Mrs. Raisin, he said, rising as she approached. His voice was low, textured by a life of apologies. I hear you've taken an interest in my late wife. Purely civic concern, said Agatha, sitting. Carsley likes its corpses tidy. He smiled, a practised, rueful curve. You're blunt. Fiona would have liked you. I doubt that, she said. We didn't share a taste for perfection. Ah, yes. He stared into his cup. Perfection. That was her religion. I provided the hymns, she sang them better. Then she left me for success. Agatha studied him. He looked respectable enough. Clean nails, weathered hands, eyes that had known both sun and debt. You designed gardens together? Once, he said, softly. She had vision, I had technique. After the divorce, she took the name, the clients, the credit. But I never stopped caring. I came back to make peace. And to ask about the Foxglove extract, perhaps. His eyes flicked up, too quick. You've been busy. I dig well, said Agatha. You should appreciate that. He laughed, though uneasily. I didn't poison her, Mrs. Raisin. I only wanted to talk. She'd written, said she was selling one of our old designs to Councillor Greavves. A shady man, if memory serves. I warned her not to. Because you wanted the money? He met her gaze squarely. Because I wanted my name cleared. I'm broke, yes, but not murderous. That evening, Agatha decided to test him further. Nothing like a good dinner to loosen tongues and morals. She invited him to her cottage, partly for interrogation, partly for the thrill of candlelight. Charles Fraith had been unavailable, fox hunt committee darling, so she prepared alone, polished silver, lit candles, decanted wine. Then, inevitably, Roy Silver appeared. He breezed in with a bottle of cheap Prosecco and the announcement, I heard you were entertaining a suspect, so I thought I'd supervise. You'll behave, Agatha warned. Of course. Like a saint with better shoes. When Gavin arrived, he took in the scene, Roy's flamboyant presence, Agatha's nervous elegance, with the politeness of a man accustomed to chaos. What a lovely home, he said. It smells of lavender. That's disinfectant, said Roy. Agatha shot him a look that could prune roses. Dinner began civilly enough. The candles glowed, the wine flowed, and Agatha found herself warming to Gavin despite every instinct. He spoke of gardens the way poets speak of muses, the balance of shadow and sunlight, the danger of beauty maintained too long. Fiona never understood decay, he said, twirling his glass. She thought nature could be managed like a reputation. And yet, said Agatha, she ended up dead among her flowers. There's irony in that. There's irony in everything, he said, even in being suspected of killing the woman you once adored. Roy coughed delicately. Speaking of suspicion, did you know she was selling a design to that greasy counsellor? Greavves, is it? Gavin's expression hardened. She mentioned it in her letter, claimed it was our masterpiece, the Garden of Reflections. I told her not to sell without my consent. She laughed. Why would Greavves buy a garden design? Asked Agatha. Because he's developing land near Mercester, said Gavin. He wanted prestige landscaping to cover the smell of corruption. And Fiona had the plans? The only copy, said Gavin, unless she gave it to him already. Agatha poured more wine. The air thickened with suspicion and candle smoke. Roy, oblivious, launched into a story about his latest PR client, an influencer who sold vegan dog biscuits, until Agatha silenced him with a glare. Tell me something, Mr. Lacey, she said. If Fiona had betrayed you again, would you have forgiven her? He hesitated. I'd have tried, but forgiveness doesn't pay bills. And you need paying. I need peace, he said, but the lie came wrapped in charm too smooth for truth. After pudding, which Roy declared emotionally undercooked, Gavin stood to leave. At the door he took Agatha's hand. You're remarkable, he said softly, blunt, fearless, and kind enough to listen. She felt the warmth rise to her cheeks. I'm also dangerous when crossed. He smiled. So was Fiona. When he'd gone, Roy collapsed into the armchair with a dramatic sigh. Darling, if he's not guilty, he's at least gorgeously tortured. You've a weakness for the type. I have no such thing, said Agatha, refilling her glass. Of course not. You just spent 2 hours interrogating him by candlelight. Research, she said. Foreplay, said Roy. Get out. He grinned, kissed her cheek, and left. The next morning the glow of wine had faded, replaced by a hangover of suspicion. Agatha called Bill Wong, who sounded as though he'd been waiting. We've had a development, he said. The toxic seeds found in Fiona's pond, Foxglove hybrids, match a batch ordered online under Belinda Dare's address. Agatha nearly dropped her mug. Belinda? The jealous rival? Yes, though she claims she was researching new varieties for a client. She would. What's the plan? We'll interview her today. And no, you're not invited. Bill, Agatha, please. Let the police do their job for once. You never do it properly, he sighed. Don't interfere. Would I ever? Constantly, he said, and hung up. Unable to sit still, Agatha decided to accidentally run into Belinda herself. She found her at the Mercester Garden Centre, gliding between aisles like a model among mulch. Belinda! Agatha exclaimed, all false cheer. Fancy seeing you here. Belinda's smile was brittle. Mrs. Raisin, still sniffing around the dead, are we? Only the interesting ones. I hear you had a fondness for foxglove seeds. Is that what they're saying now? Belinda plucked a trowel from the shelf. I ordered them for research. I'm a designer, not a poisoner. Research into what? Lethal horticulture? Into colour gradients, said Belinda coolly. Foxglove hybrids give a richer violet hue. Fiona knew that. She stole my formula once. Maybe she mixed it up again. Agatha studied her face. No flicker of guilt, only the weary disdain of a woman perpetually compared and never believed. You were rivals, said Agatha. She humiliated you at the flower show. She humiliated everyone, said Belinda, but she didn't deserve to die. Then who did? Ask her clients, said Belinda, turning away. She was selling more than gardens. The phrase lingered like perfume, sweet, unsettling. Back home, Agatha found Charles waiting on her doorstep with croissants and cynicism. I heard you wined and dined Mr. Lacey, he said. Fallen for his tragic routine yet? Don't be absurd, she said. Then why the extra lipstick? Habit. They breakfasted in uneasy friendship. Charles listened as she recounted Gavin's story and Belinda's hints. Greavves again, he said finally. He's the common weed in this garden. If Fiona was selling him a design, maybe it wasn't just landscaping. Could be a cover for money laundering, development kickbacks. Oh, don't go modern on me, said Agatha. We're not in line of duty. People kill here for envy, greed, or pride, preferably with flowers involved. Then Greavves fits nicely, said Charles. All three in abundance. So does Gavin, said Agatha quietly. He's broke and bitter, and too polished for innocence. Charles gave her a sidelong look. You like him. I don't. You do. Charles, if you don't stop smirking, I'll poison your croissant. He raised his coffee cup. With foxglove extract, no doubt. They both laughed, but uneasily. Late afternoon brought drizzle and a call from Bill. His voice was tight. We questioned Belinda. She denies everything. Claims someone used her address for the order. We traced the payment. Prepaid card. Unregistered. Clever. Meaning she could still be guilty, said Agatha. Meaning she's not the only one with access to her office computer. Her assistant handles her orders. Mark Hensley. Agatha sat up. Fiona's assistant? The same. Seems he was moonlighting, maybe blackmailing both sides. You'll bring him in? Trying to find him first. Then I'll help. You won't, said Bill firmly. And if I see you anywhere near the station, I'll arrest you for obstruction. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? He hung up. Agatha poured herself another coffee and stared out at the rain streaking the window. The village looked innocent as ever, smoke curling from chimneys, children splashing in puddles, yet every lane, every polite smile seemed threaded with deceit. She thought of Gavin's eyes across Candlelight, full of sadness and calculation, of Belinda's bitterness, of Councillor Greaves's avarice wrapped in civic bluster, all of them entangled in Fiona's life, and her death. Hodge leapt onto her lap, purring as if to anchor her. Men, Agatha muttered, stroking him. They always arrive claiming they want closure, and leave with fingerprints on your sanity. The cat blinked, unimpressed. She sighed. Somewhere between charm and deceit lay the truth, and Agatha Raisin intended to dig it up, manicure or no manicure. Outside, the drizzle thickened, soft as secrecy, veiling the lane where Gavin Lacey had walked that morning, the prodigal husband returning not for love, but she suspected for profit. And as evening fell over Carsley, Agatha poured herself a final glass of wine and raised it to the window. Here's to men who dig their own graves, she said. Saves me the trouble. The Cotswolds had that washed green look that comes after a night of rain, hedgerows beaded with water, clouds dragging their skirts across the hills. Agatha Raisin, standing on her doorstep with a mug of too strong coffee, regarded the morning as she often did, suspiciously. Somewhere in that quiet, dew-sparkled peace lay a killer, and she was beginning to suspect half the village qualified. She had hardly sat down to plan her next move when the phone rang. Bill Wong's tone was weary, the way it always got when he knew he wouldn't be obeyed. "Before you start," he said, "don't interfere." "Too late," said Agatha. "I've already had breakfast." "We've traced the original batch of digitalis, foxglove extract, to Councillor Greaves's allotment shed." Agatha's eyebrows shot up. "Greavves again? He's like mildew, turns up everywhere." "Yes, but we can't prove he used it. He claims it was part of an educational gardening project." "For whom? The Mafia Gardening Guild?" Bill sighed. "Don't start. I'm heading to Mercester for a statement. You stay out of it." "Of course," said Agatha sweetly, which meant precisely the opposite. By 11, she was in Mercester herself. The coffee shop near the garden centre was half full of gossip and cappuccinos, and at one table sat Belinda Dare, immaculate as ever, but with a fragile look around the eyes. Agatha slid into the seat opposite her without invitation. "You look dreadful," she said. Belinda gave a brittle laugh. "That's your idea of sympathy. You don't get sympathy until I know you're innocent." Belinda stared at her cup. "I told the police about the seeds. Yes, I ordered them, but not for poison. Fiona asked me to." "Oh, how convenient," said Agatha. "And why would she ask her sworn rival for that sort of favour?" "Because she said her ex-husband was obsessed with foxglove hybrids," said Belinda, voice trembling. "She wanted to hide them from him until her new design was finished. She swore me to secrecy. I thought it was harmless." "And you didn't think it odd that a woman hiding plants from her husband wanted her competitor to do the shopping?" "I liked her," Belinda admitted quietly. "In small doses. She had this way of making you feel important. It's why everyone forgave her, until they didn't." Agatha studied her, weighing truth and performance. Belinda's mascara had smudged at the corners, but the tears looked real. The confession deepened the tangle rather than loosening it. "You realize this makes you look guiltier, not less," said Agatha. "I know, but it's the truth." "We'll see," said Agatha, rising. "The truth's like a bulb, has to be dug up properly." When she got home, Charles Fraith was waiting in her kitchen, reading her post as if he owned the place. "Breaking and entering again?" she asked. I knocked. Fritz said you were probably ignoring the bell. He's learned, said Agatha. What do you want? News. Our friend Mark Hensley has been creative with arithmetic. I had a chat with one of Fiona's old clients at the golf club. Turns out invoices were reissued under slightly altered names. He's been siphoning money from her accounts for months. Agatha sat down hard. So that's why he was always hanging around looking tragic. Guilt mixed with fear. Or greed, said Charles. Either way, there's your motive. Money, not love. Or both, said Agatha, who never liked tidy motives. Charles leaned against the counter, irritatingly relaxed. He's fled, you know. Packed up this morning. Landlady said he muttered something about London. How did you hear that? Charm, darling. Works faster than warrants. Agatha ignored the flutter of admiration that threatened to soften her annoyance. Then we need to find him before the police do. We? Don't be coy, Charles. You love danger almost as much as you love yourself. He smiled. True, but I prefer it catered. That afternoon, Agatha called on Mrs. Bloxby, partly for moral support and partly to verify her own instincts. The vicar's wife welcomed her with tea and sympathy, the latter always poured without judgment. You look troubled, Agatha. I'm surrounded by suspects and idiots, and I can't decide which are which. Mrs. Bloxby smiled gently. That's the human condition. Belinda claims Fiona asked her to buy the seeds. Charles says Mark was embezzling. Bill's chasing Greavves and Foxglove extract. Honestly, it's like gardening in a hurricane. You're trying to make everything tidy, said Mrs. Bloxby. Perhaps it isn't. You're suggesting chaos? Not chaos, said Mrs. Bloxby. Just that sometimes motives grow tangled together. People rarely kill for one reason alone. Agatha frowned into her teacup. You sound like a sermon. Perhaps, but I think Fiona's death was personal as well as practical. Someone wanted to stop her, and also to punish her. For what? You'd know that better than I, said Mrs. Bloxby, eyes kind but penetrating. Agatha left feeling oddly chastened. She loved and hated that about the vicar's wife. The way her calm insight made Agatha's own bluster feel like a shield rather than armour. Back in Carsley, dusk was gathering, the kind of soft grey evening that made the cottages glow like lanterns. Agatha found Roy Silver waiting outside her gate, drenched and indignant. You could have told me we were chasing suspects again, he said. We're not. You're not. Please. I'm already halfway through designing the Justice for Fiona logo. It has excellent social media potential. Roy, I swear. Fine, fine. I'll just say hello to Charles then. He's not here. Roy's grin turned wicked. Oh? Trouble in paradise? Go home before I use you as compost, said Agatha, slamming the gate. She spent the next hour reorganizing her notes. The pieces refused to fit. Fiona's death had begun to look less like a single act and more like the collapse of an elaborate facade. Vanity, theft, jealousy, all feeding on one another until someone snapped. The knock at her door made her jump. Bill Wong stood there, rein on his shoulders and a weary patience in his eyes. I thought you were in Mercester, she said. I was. Now I'm here. And you've been busy again, haven't you? Define busy. Interrogating Belinda Dare, according to half the cafe. That woman couldn't keep a secret if it was stapled shut, said Agatha. Bill came in, shaking off his coat. You know, Agatha, you make my job harder every time. That's because I'm better at it, he smiled despite himself. You're reckless, infuriating, and usually right. But be careful. If Greavves really did have that extract, someone might think you're getting too close. Someone usually does, she said, though her heart gave a small, inconvenient flutter. He glanced at her papers. You've got a theory. 6, all contradictory. That's progress, said Bill. In murder cases, contradictions mean life. Before she could reply, his phone buzzed. He frowned, answered, then nodded. Right. I'm on my way. What now? They found Mark Hensley's car outside Greaves's allotment. Empty. Boot full of soil samples. And you're not taking me? No. Spoil sport, she said. He left, leaving behind the faint smell of rain and responsibility. The night deepened. Agatha poured herself a small whisky and stood by the window. The lane lay silent, the cottages neat and prim under the streetlight's weak halo. It all looked so innocent, she thought, and yet it never was. She was about to turn away when something pale caught her eye near the doorstep. She set down the glass and went out, slippers squelching on the damp path. There, resting on the mat, as if placed with deliberate care, was a single lilac blossom, freshly cut, its petals glistening with raindrops. Her breath caught. She bent to pick it up, heart thudding. The scent was faint but unmistakable, sweet and unsettling. Someone had been here, watching. "Very poetic," she murmured, forcing a laugh, "but you're wasting your floristry skills." Still, as she locked the door and drew the curtains, she couldn't shake the feeling that the flower wasn't a threat at all. It was a message. And worse, it was personal. She sat down, staring at the blossom now lying on the table beside her notes. Every clue, every conversation pointed back to one thing. Whoever killed Fiona hadn't finished their work. Carsley's peace, like its gardens, depended on careful pruning. And Agatha Raisin had a nasty feeling someone thought she was the next weed to be cut down. But for the moment she leaned back, let Hodge curl on her lap, and managed a crooked smile. "Poison among friends," she muttered. "That's the Cotswolds for you. Murder wrapped in manners." The cat purred, unimpressed, as outside the drizzle began again, soft and relentless, washing over a village that pretended not to notice. The morning of the memorial dawned indecisive, a weak sun struggling against low grey cloud, like a mourner who had forgotten the dress code. Agatha Raisin, staring critically out her window, decided it would do. Sunshine would make people cheerful, and she needed them sharp and quarrelsome. She'd planned the event with her usual blend of genius and chaos. Officially, it was a garden tribute to Fiona Lacey, designer, dreamer, and friend. Unofficially, it was a trap. Every suspect on her mental list had been lured in with promises of canapes, sherry, and press coverage courtesy of Roy Silver. Roy had designed the invitation himself, pale lilac lettering on cream cardstock featuring the tagline, "Let Beauty Bloom Anew." He was terribly proud of it, though Agatha thought it looked like an advert for undertakers with better lighting. By midday, the memorial garden, really Fiona's own redesigned front lawn, freshly tidied by village volunteers, was a stage set waiting for its actors. Clusters of villagers murmured among the flower beds, balancing paper cups of sherry and pretending solemnity. The air smelled faintly of foxglove and suspicion. Charles Frayth arrived first, of course, immaculate in a blazer and armed with wry amusement. "You've done it, Aggie," he said. "The social event of the season. Grief with hors d'oeuvres." "Shut up and help me spot reactions," she said. "Watch Belinda, Gavin and Greavves, and if Roy starts handing out flyers, I'll drown him in the pond." Roy, as if summoned, appeared at her elbow in a lilac silk scarf. "Darling, you underestimate my restraint. I've limited the flyers to 50. Try 0. "You're no fun," he said, sweeping off to check the lighting. Bill Wong was next, in plain clothes but radiating detective disapproval. "Please tell me this isn't one of your sting operations," he muttered. "It's a tasteful commemoration," she said, tasteful and cunningly timed the moment the toxicology report came in. "Coincidence," said Agatha sweetly. "You're impossible." "And yet you came," she said. He sighed. "To prevent arrest warrants, including yours." By 2 o'clock the suspects had assembled like flowers from very different gardens. Belinda Dare, icy and pale, stood near the petunias pretending not to watch Gavin Lacey. Gavin himself looked dangerously tense, the worn charm replaced by a brittle edge. Councillor Greavves, ruddy and smug, chatted loudly with anyone who couldn't escape fast enough. Agatha began her speech, though calling it that was generous. "We're gathered today to celebrate Fiona's work," she said, projecting her best village committee voice. Her passion for beauty, her dedication to gardens, and her unfortunate tendency to annoy everyone within a 5-mile radius. A nervous chuckle ran through the crowd. Agatha pressed on. "In Fiona's honour, we're opening this space to the community, a reminder that roots once disturbed can grow in strange directions." Charles murmured, metaphorical and menacing. "Very you." "Shut up," she hissed, then raised her voice. "Now, please enjoy the refreshments, but do mind the pond. It's deep." That last line was deliberate. The pond shimmered at the far end, deceptively peaceful. Agatha watched faces as people turned toward it. Gavin's jaw tightened. Belinda's fingers gripped her cup. Greavves looked bored, which was suspicious in itself. Roy drifted by, whispering, "Darling, you're doing marvellously. I feel like I'm in Midsummer Murders, but with better catering." "Go find me gossip," she ordered. For the first 20 minutes, the gathering was merely awkward. Then the sherry began to work. Voices grew louder. Compliments took on edges. Agatha circulated, smiling brightly. "Lovely turnout, counsellor. How's the allotment project?" Greavves puffed up. "Thriving. Just signed a new landscaping contract with the Mercester developers. Lucrative work, that." "Developers?" said Gavin sharply from nearby. "You mean my designs?" Greavves blinked. "Your what?" "The Garden of Reflections, Fiona's and mine. You stole it through her." The crowd hushed. Greavves sneered. "Rubbish. Fiona sold it fair and square. Maybe you should manage your finances better before throwing accusations." Gavin's face flushed red. "You ruined me! You and your bribes and your false contracts." Before anyone could stop him, he lunged. The sherry tray went flying. Gasps followed as Charles and Bill grabbed Gavin by the shoulders. "Let go of me," Gavin shouted. "He's the reason she's dead. She was going to expose him. I know it." "That's enough," Bill barked, steering him back. Agatha's mind raced. Expose him. So Fiona had known something criminal about Greavves. Maybe she'd threatened to go public. That would make motive number 3 for the good counsellor. "We'll take this inside," said Bill. "No," said Agatha. "Let them breathe. Nothing kills gossip faster than discretion." "You're impossible," he muttered again. "So I've heard," she said. As the commotion subsided, Agatha noticed movement at the edge of the crowd. Mark Hensley, Fiona's young assistant, pale and twitchy, edging away toward the pond. Her instincts sharpened. "Charles," she whispered, "watch Greavves. I'll handle our disappearing act." She followed, careful not to draw attention. Mark moved fast, almost running, then slowed as he reached the water. The pond glittered under the weak sun, the surface broken by a single drifting lilac petal. Agatha crouched behind a shrub, feeling both ridiculous and exhilarated. Mark bent down near the edge, muttering to himself. She caught fragments. Should have kept quiet. Stupid woman. She shouldn't have threatened to tell. Agatha's heart jolted. She stepped forward. "Talking to the fish, are we?" He spun round, eyes wild. "Mrs. Raisin, I was just committing introspection or disposing of evidence. You don't understand." "Try me," she said, folding her arms. He glanced toward the garden. The voices of the party drifted faintly. Laughter, glasses clinking, the hum of gossip returning to normal. "I didn't kill her," he blurted. "I swear it, but I know who did." "That's terribly convenient." "Who then?" "Greavves," he whispered. "She said she was going to expose him for laundering money through her commissions. I told her not to provoke him. The next day she was dead." "And you didn't tell the police?" "I was scared. He paid me off to keep quiet, said it was for my loyalty. But when I heard they'd found the digitalis near his allotment, I panicked. I came to see if anything was left here, something he might have dropped." Agatha eyed him. He looked sincere, but sincerity was cheap in murder cases. "You realize, if this is true, you're still an accessory," he sagged. "I just wanted it to stop." "Murder rarely does," she said softly. Before she could press further, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Agatha!" Bill was striding across the lawn, Charles at his side. Behind them, Roy was photographing the chaos like a war correspondent. "What now?" Bill demanded. "I was enjoying a little chat," said Agatha. "A little interrogation, more like," said Charles. "You can thank me later," said Agatha. "You're assuming we'll want to," said Bill. They gathered by the pond, the crowd drifting closer like curious sheep. Mark, pale and sweating, tried to explain himself under Bill's steady gaze. His story matched what he'd told Agatha. Bribery, silence, fear. Greavves blustered. "Lies! The boy's a thief! He forged her signatures. I've proof." "And Fiona threatened to reveal that too, I suppose," said Agatha. "She was unstable," Greavves barked. "Everyone knew it." "Unstable enough to drink Foxglove voluntarily?" she shot back. Silence rippled through the group. Agatha pointed toward the pond. She hated wasps, didn't she? The day she collapsed, everyone assumed a sting. But if she'd been holding a glass, a toast perhaps, someone could have slipped digitalis in while pretending to brush off a wasp. And she'd drink it rather than make a fuss. Manners, they're deadly in the countryside. Bill gave her a look that was equal parts admiration and exasperation. "You're guessing again, Agatha." "Educated intuition," she said. "There's a difference?" "Only in salary." The mood had shifted. The polite chatter was gone, replaced by the low hum of accusation. Even Mrs. Bloxby, who had arrived quietly to pay her respects, looked uneasy. "Perhaps we should all calm down," she said gently. "Indeed," said Charles, "before Agatha hosts a second memorial for the living." But Agatha barely heard them. Her eyes were fixed on the pond, on the faint reflection of lilacs trembling at its edge. Something about the angle of the path, the way Fiona's glass must have fallen, her thoughts snapped together like twigs underfoot. "Bill," she said quietly, "if Greavves poisoned her, why bury the receipts? Why not destroy them? Unless he didn't. Unless someone else used his extract." "Meaning?" "Meaning our culprit had access to Greaves's shed and to Fiona's trust. Someone clever enough to use both." Her gaze drifted to Mark Hensley. He looked down, jaw tight. She filed the reaction away for later. The memorial sputtered to an uneasy end. Guests murmured excuses and fled. Even Roy, who had filmed enough scandal to last a week, slunk off after a scolding from Bill. As the last car drove away, Agatha lingered by the lilac arch. The air had turned chill. Charles joined her, hands in pockets. "Well," he said, "you've successfully turned a tribute into a near riot. Satisfied?" "Not yet, but closer." "You think Greavves did it?" "He's vile enough, but too obvious." "No, there's something off about Mark. His story's too polished, his guilt too rehearsed." "And you'll test your theory how?" "By inviting him for tea," she said. Charles laughed. "You're fearless." "I'm furious," said Agatha. "There's a difference." As they turned toward her cottage, a gust of wind rustled the lilacs, scattering petals across the grass like a confetti of foreboding. "You realize," said Charles, "you're playing with fire again." "Then I hope it burns politely," she replied. That night, Carsley seemed almost too still. The lane gleamed damp under the street lamp. Agatha closed her curtains and tried to focus on paperwork, but her thoughts kept circling back to the pond, to Mark's muttered confession, and to the words he'd let slip. She shouldn't have threatened to tell. Tell what? Agatha looked toward the lilac blossom she'd kept from the previous night, now drying on her desk. Another symbol, another warning. But she smiled faintly. Whoever was behind the petals had underestimated her. She might be vain, meddlesome, and occasionally reckless, but Agatha Raisin never wilted under pressure. Outside, the rain began again, steady and patient, watering secrets that were ready to bloom. The morning after the Memorial Garden riot dawned with that pale, apologetic light the Cotswolds reserved for the aftermath of scandal. Carsley looked freshly washed and faintly ashamed, as if the village itself regretted its behaviour. Agatha Raisin did not. She sat at her kitchen table in a dressing gown, mug of coffee in hand, scanning the Mercester Gazette headline, "Local Memorial Erupts into Sherry-Fueled Brawl." "At least they used a flattering photo," she muttered. Charles Fraith, sprawled opposite in one of her chairs, chuckled. "You do realise you've just been promoted from village busybody to regional spectacle." "Publicity is a small price for progress," she said primly. "Besides, I've nearly solved the case." "You've said that every day this week." "This time it's true." She tapped a folder thick with her notes. "Mark Hensley's story doesn't hold water. He's been too precise, too rehearsed, and those lilac blossoms, trophies, I'd wager. We're seeing him today, and this time he won't wriggle off like an eel in hair gel." Charles looked sceptical but intrigued. "Shall I bring the champagne or the handcuffs?" "Bill's bringing both," said Agatha, rising. "Let's go before he tries to talk me out of it." The day had brightened into one of those deceptive English afternoons. Sunshine sharp as glass, shadows cool and conspiratorial. The three of them arrived at Fiona's old property on Lilac Lane, now sealed off but not entirely deserted. A police car waited discreetly by the hedge. Bill Wong leaned against it, radiating long-suffering patience. "Please tell me," he said as Agatha marched up, "that you've left subtlety at home today." "I've never found subtlety gets results," said Agatha. "Neither does trespassing," Bill replied. "You invited me," she reminded him. "I said consult informally," he sighed. "Semantics," said Charles, pocketing a hip flask. Bill ignored him and gestured toward the garden. "Hensley's inside. Claims he wants to clear his conscience. Let's hope your presence doesn't send him back into liar's limbo." "Oh, I'll bring him clarity," said Agatha grimly. They found Mark Hensley in the conservatory, pale, sleepless, his hands worrying the edge of a handkerchief. The glass roof threw fractured sunlight across his face, making him look like a man already behind bars. "Mrs. Raisin," he said, voice tight. "Inspector, Lord Fraith." "You seem nervous," said Agatha. "That's good. Nerves are the conscience knocking." He swallowed. "I just want to end this." "Then begin it properly," said Bill. Mark drew a breath. "You already know I stole from Fiona. Small amounts at first, client deposits, nothing she'd miss. But she did. She found out 2 weeks before she died." "She confronted you?" Bill asked. He nodded. "Said she'd tell everyone. Ruin me. I begged her to reconsider, told her I'd pay it back. She agreed to meet here by the pond to talk it through." Agatha folded her arms. That was generous of her. Dead women are notoriously forgiving. Mark's face twitched. "I never meant for it to happen like that. I brought wine to show goodwill, just 1 glass. But I'd panicked. I'd taken a bottle from her shed, the same one she'd used for the foxglove extract. I thought maybe a little would calm her down. I didn't know how strong it was." "Oh, spare me," said Agatha. "Digitalis isn't a sedative. It's a murder weapon. You knew exactly what you were doing." "I didn't," he cried. "I swear it. I only wanted to scare her, to keep her quiet." "By killing her?" "By reminding her who she was dealing with," he said, voice breaking. "She drank too fast. 1 sip, then she staggered, said she felt faint. I panicked, tried to help, but when she fell—" "Into the pond," said Agatha quietly. He nodded. "I froze. I thought if I called for help, they'd hang me. So I ran. I came back later and left the lilac blossoms. It was her favourite flower. I wanted her to have something beautiful." Bill's pen paused. "You expect us to believe that wasn't guilt?" "It was guilt," said Mark. "It still is." "And the envelope buried in the compost heap," said Agatha. "Receipts for the extract you bought in her name." He hesitated too long. "That was just paperwork." "And the seeds ordered under Belinda Dare's address? Another coincidence?" "She was helping Fiona," he protested. "I didn't know." Agatha's eyes glittered. "You're a liar, Mr. Hensley, and a coward. You used every woman around you as camouflage. Fiona to fund you, Belinda to hide your trail, and me to tidy your mess. But you left your own signature. Lilac blossoms on every scene. A murderer with a sentimental streak. How perfectly provincial." His composure cracked. "You can't prove any of that." "We can," said Bill, holding up a small evidence bag. Inside lay a smear of dried soil flecked with lilac petals. "Found on your boots this morning. Same soil type as the pond edge. You really should clean your shoes after murder." Mark's expression curdled from fear to fury. "You meddling fools," he spat, lunging. It happened fast. 1 shove sent the table skidding, the teacups crashing. Agatha stumbled back, caught her heel on the rug, and heard the unmistakable snap of her favourite shoe. "Oh, marvellous," she muttered, balancing on 1 foot. Mark bolted for the garden. Bill shouted, Charles cursed, and Agatha, hopping heroically, hobbled after them. The chase burst into the open air. Mark tore down the path, scattering petals as he went. The pond glittered ahead like a smug accomplice. Agatha limped gamely behind, fury outpacing discomfort. "Stop him," she yelled, "before he fertilizes himself." Charles, surprisingly quick for a man who viewed jogging as a moral failing, intercepted him at the azalea border. There was a brief, undignified struggle, a tangle of limbs, curses, and shrubbery, before Charles executed what could only be described as a genteel rugby tackle. They landed with a wet thud in a bed of pink blossoms. "Got him," Charles wheezed. Agatha arrived just in time to see Mark's expression, shock, rage, and something like relief. Bill cuffed him, reciting the charge in that calm voice that made even murder sound like a traffic violation. "You have the right to remain silent," Bill said. "Finally," panted Agatha, sinking onto a garden bench. "Someone in this village who will." Charles sat beside her, covered in azalea petals and triumph. "You owe me new trousers," he said. "Add it to my list of emotional debts," she replied. By the time the reporters arrived, led inevitably by Roy Silver wielding his phone like a paparazzo at the Oscars, the scene had devolved into chaos again. "Agatha, darling," Roy cried, clicking furiously. "You look divine. Muddy but magnificent." "Roy, if you post those, I'll poison your latte," she said. "The public adores authenticity." "They'll adore my foot up your—" "Smile," he trilled. Bill intervened with professional despair. "Miss Raisin, if you could please refrain from assaulting the press." He started it, she said. He's always starting it, said Charles. It's how he breathes. Roy beamed. Now tell me, how does it feel to single-handedly bring down a murderer? Single-handedly, said Bill. You had help, Roy conceded, but your face sells better. Agatha rolled her eyes. It feels like indigestion and victory in equal parts. Once Mark was driven away, the crowd thinned. The garden returned to uneasy quiet, a few petals floating on the pond, a faint ripple where sunlight broke the surface. Bill lingered. Well done, Agatha. You were right again, infuriatingly. Of course I was, she said, but don't sound so shocked. You took a risk confronting him like that. Life's dull without risk. And dangerous with it, he said softly. She shrugged. Everything worth doing is. He smiled faintly, then headed to his car. Charles remained, brushing soil from his sleeves. Well, that's that. The case closed, the culprit caught, the heroine heroic. You make it sound like the end of a pantomime, said Agatha. In Carsley it always is. They stood watching the police car disappear down the lane. The air smelled faintly of lilac and damp earth, a fragrance too sweet for death, too persistent for innocence. Strange, she murmured. I thought I'd feel satisfied. You don't? Oh, I do. Just hollow. I'll miss the chase. Charles gave her a sidelong look. Addiction to murder isn't healthy, Aggie. Neither is salad, but people do it anyway. He laughed. What will you do now? Something sensible, she said. I might even rest. You? Never. Probably not, she admitted. Later, back in her cottage, Agatha cleaned her broken heel with unnecessary vigour. Hodge and Boswell lounged on the windowsill, unimpressed by heroism. She poured herself a generous gin and stared at the lilac blossom she'd kept, dried now, its petals brittle but still faintly perfumed. Fiona's favourite flower, a murderer's memento. And yet, Agatha thought, perhaps also a reminder, that beauty and deceit often grow from the same root. She smiled wryly. Lilac Lane, she murmured. I should have known. Everything pretty here comes with thorns. Her phone buzzed. A message from Roy. You're trending. Detective diver of the Cotswolds. Love it, she groaned, then couldn't help laughing. Oh, why not, she said aloud. Every diva deserves her day. Outside, dusk gathered, soft and lilac-tinted. The village lights flickered on one by one, and from somewhere down the lane drifted the faint murmur of neighbours already discussing her latest adventure. Agatha raised her glass in mock salute. To Fiona, she said, to justice, and to new shoes. She sipped, savouring the gin's clean sting. The case was closed, the villain caught, and yet, as always, a tiny part of her longed for the next knock on the door, the next whisper of scandal beneath the Cotswold calm. Because Agatha Raisin, for all her flaws, knew one immutable truth. Peace, however pretty, was terribly dull. Carsley, when scandal faded, had a way of righting itself like a resilient flower after rain. By midsummer, the gossip about Fiona Lacey's demise had been carefully pruned into anecdote, a cautionary tale told over teapots and trimmed hedges. The lane's gardens, once choked by suspicion, now thrived with almost defiant colour. Geraniums blazed, roses preened, and the lilacs, naturally, were magnificent. Agatha Raisin surveyed it all with mixed feelings. She was pleased, of course, to have solved the murder, but irked that everyone now remembered it as that unfortunate business. It was always business in Carsley, never passion, greed, or malice. The English talent for euphemism was, she thought, the real national flower. Still, there were consolations. The papers had stopped calling. Bill Wong had taken a short holiday, presumably to recover from her company, and Charles had sent her a text reading, "Still alive, rather dull, miss your chaos." She'd deleted it, then regretted it, then checked her deleted folder twice. The afternoon was warm enough for the garden chairs, so she took her tea outside, accompanied by Hodge and Boswell and a faintly critical Robin. The air hummed with bees and the gossip of neighbours drifting over the hedge. Mrs. Bloxby appeared presently, bringing a lemon-drizzle cake and her usual air of quiet reason. "You look well, Agatha," she said, setting the cake down. "I should. I've been avoiding murder for a whole week." "An achievement worth celebrating." Agatha smiled wryly. "It won't last. It never does." Mrs. Bloxby poured the tea. You sound almost disappointed. Nonsense, I'm perfectly content, peaceful even. You say that as if it were an illness. It might be, said Agatha, gazing at the lilacs along her fence. Peace gives one time to think. Dangerous habit. Mrs. Blocksby studied her with affectionate amusement. You've been reflecting. Trying not to, but yes. Fiona Lacey, vain, clever, doomed. She reminds me of, well, me on a bad day. A bit too eager to be admired. A bit too quick to believe flattery. Vanity isn't wickedness, said Mrs. Blocksby. It's just misplaced hope. The wish to be loved for what one shows instead of what one is. Agatha looked away, touched and annoyed at once. You make sin sound so civilized. It usually is, said Mrs. Blocksby gently. They ate cake in companionable silence. The village clock chimed 4. Somewhere down the lane a lawnmower started, slicing the stillness into polite domestic hum. It's odd, said Agatha after a while. Foxglove. Such a pretty plant. Heart medicine and heart poison all in one. Rather sums people up. And vanity too, said Mrs. Blocksby. Decorative and deadly depending on how it's used. Agatha laughed. You should take over my detective agency. You've got the moral speeches for it. I'll leave that to you, said Mrs. Blocksby. I prefer my mysteries in scripture. At least yours come with resurrection, said Agatha. And yours, Mrs. Blocksby replied softly, come with learning. Oh, don't start that. I've learned nothing except that men are trouble and shoes are unreliable. But even as she said it, Agatha felt the warmth of the vicar's wife's kindness settle around her like sunlight through cloud, uninvited, slightly embarrassing, and oddly comforting. Later that evening, Charles rang. Dinner at the Swan, he said. I'll bring champagne. You bring that terrifying efficiency you call charm. Agatha hesitated. I can't. I've a hair appointment tomorrow and I need an early night. Ah, said Charles. Turning over a new leaf? A mature one, she said crisply. Suit yourself, though maturity never suited you. She hung up with a smile she refused to analyze. Still, before bed, she found herself in front of the mirror, checking for no reason that her hair hadn't flattened, that her lipstick wasn't too bright. She told herself it was habit. Vanity, after all, was only fatal if swallowed. Morning brought post, the usual bills, catalogues, and one card addressed in flamboyant silver ink. She slit it open and read aloud. Darling, new client on Lavender Hill, and she swears her husband's trying to kill her. Fancy a holiday. Love, Roy. Agatha laughed out loud, startling the cats. The postcard showed a woman in a sun hat fainting over a martini glass. Lavender Hill, she murmured. Poisoned by perfume next, no doubt. She set the card on her mantelpiece where it glowed cheerfully against the china ornaments. She told herself she wouldn't go, that she'd had enough drama to last the summer. She'd prune her roses, attend the parish fete, maybe even join the book club. But as the day drifted on and the sun turned the lane to gold, Agatha found herself humming. She tidied her handbag, checked the train times to London, and told herself it was only curiosity, because really, what harm could a little holiday do? The village, basking in its deceptive calm, seemed to wink in reply, and so, with the faintest stir of excitement beneath her dignity, Agatha Raisin straightened her shoulders, locked her door, and stepped out into another bloom of trouble.